What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Friday, December 22nd, 2017, end of the week, Friday before Christmas. And we have got a lot of stuff to talk about. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Claire and I are still on the tail end of this flu bug, and it was a nasty one. I've been getting emails from readers and listeners saying they've got it too, and apparently it's a really bad one. So we're still on the tail end of that, but we're going to do our show today, and Claire's going to try and be here for hour number 3, but the way she's kind of coughing and sneezing back there, I don't know. We may have to do something else for that hour. Anyway, let's get right on into it. Obviously, the Friday before Christmas and the last-minute shopping is going on down there, and they're just trying to find that special gift to give to somebody. Last second, oh, my goodness, somebody gave me a gift. We forgot to get them one. That kind of craziness here. Let's get into the domestic politics here right now. As you know, Donald Trump signed the tax reform bill and then jetted off to Florida for the holiday weekend. And everybody is out there saying it's going to be good, it's going to be bad, but I think we need to take a lesson from Obamacare. Remember how good that was going to be? And then once it was actually in place, we found out just how bad it was for the vast majority of the American people. So I think probably the same thing's going to be happening with that as well. Now we're going to be talking next week about looking back on this year and summing up, but I think it's safe to say right now that in a lot of ways Donald Trump has been a bit of a disappointment. We did not get the Donald Trump we thought we were voting for. We didn't get the swamp drainer. We didn't get the person who was going to put Hillary in jail. Unfortunately, we did get somebody who's just all gung-ho for more of these foreign military interventions and running a risk of nuclear war. Getting on back to domestic politics here, apparently Tablet magazine is out there saying that the trail of the Russian dossier origination, where it started, now leads directly to the Obama White House. And apparently Mary Jacoby even bragged about getting the Russiagate narrative started. So this Tablet investigation, using public sources to trace the evolution of the dodgy dossier, suggests that central elements of the Russiagate scandal emerged not from the British ex-spy Christopher Steele's top-secret sources, but from a series of stories that Fusion GPS co-founder Glenn Simpson and his wife Mary Jacoby co-wrote for the Wall Street Journal well before Fusion GPS even existed. So the claims made in the dossier were made long ago. They just recycled them. It's like when phony Tony Blair recycled a 12-year-old thesis paper for his dodgy dossier on Iraq. So that story is continuing to fall apart. Now, Tuesday, as you know, FBI Director Andrew McCabe went up to Capitol Hill for his 10-hour closed-door testimony and was accompanied by his defense shield, FBI legal counsel, James Baker. And it went very badly. Now, obviously, it was closed door, but some of the stuff leaked out. Apparently, McCabe suddenly couldn't remember his relationship with the Steele dossier, and apparently made several conflicting statements with previous witnesses. And so now the investigators are going to be issuing more subpoenas. And apparently James Baker has been basically detached from the case or kicked out. Don't know if he's been fired, but he's not part of the team anymore. Now, there was another figure who was called to testify, and you probably remember the name Bruce Orr. He was the official who was taken off of Mueller's team for concealing meetings that he had with Fusion GPS. And apparently he was called to testify before Congress, refused to show up. So, I mean, it's telegraphing right there that there's something going on, because this is the type of behavior usually exhibited by criminals. when they're trying to just not have to say anything at all. Now, again, getting on back to Fusion GPS founder Glenn Simpson, his wife, Mary Jacoby, is so proud of the work that they did. She bragged on Facebook that her husband was behind the Russiagate story. Look what he did. He did a good thing. It wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the husband. They're bragging about it. They're bragging about how they cooked up this complete nonsensical story to attack Donald Trump. Now, Rand Paul is out there saying the time has come to investigate high-ranking Obama government officials who might have colluded to prevent the election of Donald Trump. This could be worse than Watergate. And he's absolutely right. Watergate was a very small group of operators. The Dirty Trick Squad, the plumbers, Donald Segretti, that whole group. This is far more pervasive. It's involving entire agencies. And it is worse than Watergate. And it does need to be investigated, and it does need to be exposed. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, there is a very pleasing rumor that Hillary Clinton may be in the crosshairs because prosecutors over at the Department of Justice have started asking FBI agents about the Uranium One deal. And apparently the FBI has sent out notices to every agency involved in the Uranium One deal to preserve all records. So put away that shredding machine. You have to keep that record intact. Speaking of Hillary, there's an article about how Hillary is mulling just what her role will be in next year's midterm elections. And Hillary, for the most part, has all but avoided appearing at campaign events since she lost the election last year. She's out there on the book tour. But apparently some Democrats think that she still has star power. And they're asking if Hillary would hit the campaign trail on behalf of Democratic candidates next year. I really have a hard time thinking that that's going to work. What may be going on is they're going to put Hillary out on the campaign trail as a prelude to her trying again for the White House in 2020. I know she said she doesn't want to do that, but she's behaving like somebody who's angling for another shot at that Oval Office. Now, good old Judicial Watch has managed to acquire legally and will release 2,800 government emails the FBI found on Anthony Weiner's laptop, and they're going to be released next week on December 29th. And Tom Fitton is out there saying that they're expecting this will include classified and other sensitive materials. And says, when will the Justice Department do a serious investigation of Hillary Clinton and Huma Abedin's obvious violations of law? Well, Tom, my guess is probably when they open up that ice skating rink in the dark regions. But all we can do is keep on pushing, keep on sharing information with each other, keep on making a stink. Get noisy, get loud. Yes, this deserves to be investigated. Look at all the time, effort, and money they poured into this Russian collusion investigation, and they found absolutely nothing. Is it not now time to spend equivalent amounts of time and money looking into the Clinton Foundation, into the email server, into all kinds of other things for which there's already documented evidence, like the Uranium One deal? Okay, now, moving on to the continuing aftermath of Donald Trump's declaration that he recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. The ramifications are still percolating. Palestinian factions called for a third Friday of Rage in a continued protest against Donald Trump. And the mass protests were the third call by Palestinian factions for widespread protest once Trump announced his recognition of Jerusalem. And apparently Palestinians have protested nearly every day against Donald Trump, the Israeli occupation in the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza. So far, 6 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli forces in protest. Hundreds more have been injured. Now, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, while visiting Paris, said that basically the United States has disqualified itself from the Middle East peace process. And he's absolutely correct. The U.S. has shown the world it is not an impartial arbiter of peace in the region. It should have been sitting on Israel's side of the table all along, and everybody sees it now. Now, getting on back to the United Nations, as you know, that turned out to be a huge embarrassment for Donald Trump. Despite the threats from Nikki Haley that any country voting in favor of this resolution would expect to lose U.S. financial aid, 128 nations voted in favor of this resolution calling for the U.S. to reverse its recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital. And basically the vote was a thunderous no to U.S. efforts at intimidation. Meanwhile, Iran responded to the U.S. threats, basically saying the U.S. is trying to enforce thuggish demands on the rest of the world. And it was a very reckless, ham-handed thing for Trump and Nikki Haley to do. Other countries are chiming on in, despite the economic threats, despite the threat to the cut of financial aid. Pakistan's support for Palestine remains unwavering, says Miliha Lodi. Iran's United Nations envoy lauds the defeat of the United States Al-Quds plan. Well, it's not really defeated because Nikki Haley has come on back after the vote and said, well, the United Nations is irrelevant. We're going to go ahead and put our embassy in Jerusalem. Meanwhile, nature abhors a vacuum, and it was never truer than it was in politics. With the United States having self-destructed regarding a peace plan for the Middle East, Putin and Erdogan are now stepping on in and saying it's time to discuss the creation of a Palestinian state. And I'm sure Israel is going to scream, no, you can't do that. And Donald Trump will say you can't do that. Nikki Haley will say you can't do that. But you need to remember how Israel was created. The Zionists just grabbed off a huge chunk of Palestine, put up a flag and said, we are now Israel. Harry Truman recognized the new nation, and that was it. And that's all it would take, would be one or more countries saying, we recognize the state of Palestine within these borders. So it looks like Putin is stepping into that power vacuum in the Middle East, and we're seeing again more evidence that Erdogan is pivoting away from the United States following that botched coup d'etat a while back. Meanwhile, in another sign that America's influence in the world is waning, apparently Iranian and French diplomats are discussing closer ties. They've had 4 rounds of political talks, and it looks like they're moving forward for economic partnerships, and it's another sign. France is moving away. The United States empire is collapsing. Now, over in Syria, tensions between the Syrian army and the Syrian Democratic Forces are continuing to grow. Now, remember, the Syrian Arab Army is the Syrian government army. The Syrian Democratic Forces are one of the U.S.-backed rebel groups, terrorists, what have you. And unfortunately, the Syrian Democratic Forces are escalating their attacks on government forces, and basically sending the message that even though ISIS has pretty much collapsed in Syria, the United States is not going to leave, and they're not going to cancel their support for all these rebel groups. They're back to the original agenda. We're going to get Bashar al-Assad out of Damascus and put our own willing puppet in there. Meanwhile, interesting little story that came out of Investment Watch blog. Once again, the conspiracy theorists were proven right. Corporate media is now finally admitting that the United States government was arming ISIS, supplying weapons, ammunition, training, logistical support. And so you've got Reuters and USA Today are suddenly reporting that, yeah, the United States and Saudi Arabia were supplying weapons and ammunition to ISIS. And they were supplied a huge amount of weapons and ammunition. And remember, a lot of the same information surfaced in documents from Hillary Clinton's State Department, pried loose by Judicial Watch. So those of us paying attention, we knew this all along. But finally, the corporate media has caught up to the independent media. Another article, this is from Russia Insider. A lot of people are wondering, what is the United States doing in the Middle East anyway? Is it all about the oil? Is it all about the oil currency? Is it all about private central banking? Well, according to this one story coming out of Russia Insider, the U.S. is basically engaging in a policy of slash and burn all over the Middle East to deliberately have literally a scorched earth, and forcing Iran and, by extension, Russia to bear the cost of rebuilding in order to weaken them, to overextend them, to exhaust them, sort of the Soviet Union in reverse. We'll see what happens. Meanwhile, the Pentagon has confirmed something that we had assumed to be the case anyway. There are U.S. ground troops on the ground in Yemen. It's not just Saudi Arabia, it's actual U.S. forces, and apparently they're confirming multiple ground operations, as well as apparently 120 airstrikes by U.S. aircraft last year. And they're saying the U.S. operations aren't being well documented. Well, yeah, just like the ones down in Niger. They don't want people to know what's going on. But apparently in January, almost immediately after the inauguration, the U.S. attacked the village of Yakla, claiming there was an al-Qaeda collaborator there, and the troops ended up destroying most of the village in the offensive. Shades of Vietnam. We had to destroy the village to save it. It's amazing. Getting on back to Yemen. The number of suspected cholera cases in Yemen has hit 1 million, according to the International Committee of the Red Cross. I am very concerned that what we're seeing here is not a natural infectious process, but a biological weapon. Cholera has been used as a biological weapon before. Long history, including before World War II. Now, up in Afghanistan, you'll probably remember a while ago there was a big stink where Afghanistan wanted to buy some Russian helicopters because they've got long experience with how effective a platform they are, going back to Charlie Wilson's war. But apparently the U.S. has done a lot of arm twisting and convinced Afghanistan to abandon the Russian helicopters and go with their American counterparts. It's all about the money. It's all about the defense contracts. Anyway, now, according to Russia's defense ministry head, Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu, said that the U.S. missile defense system in Europe has been brought to the level of initial operational readiness. Here's the important part. The number of NATO servicemen deployed near the Russian borders has grown from 10 to 40,000 over the last 3 years. So, who do you think the aggressor is? When you park missiles, tanks, and 40,000 soldiers on somebody's border, who is the aggressor? Now, there's another little article over here. This is from Sputnik News. And it's saying that Chinese military experts... Actually, we got to take a break for commercials here. So we'll be back after these few words. Erica, welcome back to the show here. And one more time, for those of you who want to help Republic Broadcasting stay on the air, the postal address is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302. And that's in Round Rock, Texas, 78664. If you want to call on in and become a subscriber, that number is 800-724-2719, extension 03. And every little bit helps and is greatly, greatly appreciated. Now then, getting on back to North Korea, Chinese military analysts are looking at how hard the United States is pushing on North Korea. And they're beginning to believe that the U.S. is actually using North Korea just as a cover to deploy more naval assets to curb China's military aspirations in the Pacific, like those South China Sea islands. The U.S. wants an excuse to box in that part of the Pacific Ocean. And it's expected the U.S. will deploy some 4 to 6 aircraft combat groups to the Pacific region under the pretext of countering the growing North Korean threat following the recent nuclear tests. So if China is really thinking that, then China is not going to be on board putting any more pressure on North Korea. So the dynamics are definitely changing over there. Now, apparently, Russia has activated 3 new early warning missile attack radars covering its southeastern frontiers, including the border with North Korea. This is in response to North Korea's missile tests and the possibility that every once in a while one of these missiles does not come down where it's expected. Sorry, I had to do a cough there. Now, admittedly, more recently, North Korea does seem to be getting its missile act together. But in the early days, they had a lot of missiles just stray way off course. So that may be why Russia is very, very nervous. But I don't think Russia seriously thinks North Korea will intentionally attack. That would be rather silly. Same thing applies to the United States. But they've got the radars up there and running. Now, do you remember that big stink a while back where Russia Today was forced to register as a foreign agent? And apparently the Department of Justice has now come on out and acknowledged that this all came on the basis of a report filled with inaccurate facts, obsolete data, and outright errors. So it's almost like the Russia dossier. We just need an excuse. We want to do something, we just need an excuse. Come up with a dossier. Let's talk about the economic news. There are some developments going on over there. Apparently, Pakistan is considering dropping the use of the U.S. dollar and replacing it with the yuan for all bilateral trade between Pakistan and China. Makes perfect sense. Why would you go through a third-party currency that you have to pay for the privilege of using? So the global dominance of the almighty dollar is definitely on the wane. Now, as you know, in another week, we're going to be getting into the new year, and 18 states will increase their minimum wages on January 1st, benefiting 4.5 million workers. And let's see, minimum wage increases ranging from 35 cents an hour in Michigan to $1 in Maine. Now, as you know, the U.S. is waging sanction war on, well, just about everybody, but with regard to Russia, the Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson described the latest expansion of the Magnitsky List by the U.S. authorities as grotesque and detached from reality, promising there will be reciprocal measures. And he's saying this is all grotesque because it's not based on any reality whatsoever. Unfortunately, we, meaning Russia, are forced to reiterate our position that boils down to the fact that these steps would be followed by reciprocal measures. In other words, the sanction war is ratcheting up on both sides. The bad news, economic wars have a bad habit of turning into real shooting wars. And we would not like to see that happen at all. The U.S. Census Bureau has published a rather interesting statistic, and it has to do with science, technology, and math offered in school, often called STEM for short, science, technology, engineering, math. And the Census Bureau reported that 74% of recently graduated students who have a bachelor's degree in these subjects don't work in these jobs. The jobs aren't there. They've gone overseas. So we have these kids who went to school, probably took out student loans. They're in debt, they've got the degree, and the job with which they were going to pay off the student loan just simply isn't there. We need some science stimulus in our local industry, and I know Trump is convinced his tax plan is going to bring manufacturing back here, but I think a civilian technology incubator, like a new space program, a new space goal, that'll provide jobs to these kids with these degrees. That's what I think we ought to be doing. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials here. Do join us on the air, 800-313-9443, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Now, up in Canada, police in Ontario are warning the public about yet another scam that's out there, and this one involves fake gold bars that are being sold online through buy and sell websites. Apparently they're very professionally packed. They're very convincing. They look perfect, but it's been discovered they're actually copper with gold plate on them, and they're being sold online for up to $1,200. They're actually worth about $2. So again, especially when you're dealing with precious metals, reputable dealer, because there's a lot of fraud out there, even by some of the banks. So anyway, now then, if you are holding cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin or Litecoin, you had a rough time on the exchange today. Major drop across the board. Bitcoin down $4,000 in just 24 hours. Litecoin down 48%. And again, not sure whether it's just end of the year profit taking. People are trying to get out of their Bitcoin positions and cash out. But again, because there is no inherent value underneath the Bitcoin price, yeah, a major sell-off is going to result in a major drop in prices. So we'll see what's going to happen. But already we're seeing exhortations from so-called experts saying, well, now's the time to buy in. You know, if the price has gone back down, now's the time for your bargain. And I'm still trying to learn all about Bitcoin and what it really means and what it's actually useful for. And again, thanks to everybody who donated through Bitcoin. The problem with the system is I have no way of knowing who you are. And so I can't send my usual personal thank you notes. So that's why I put the comment, buy the Bitcoin donate button on the page, and why I make a point of mentioning it here on the radio show every once in a while. All right, let's turn on over to Europe, and specifically Great Britain. Apparently, Labour members of Parliament have hatched a plot to try and change the Brexit bill in a bid to revoke Article 50 and just stop Britain from leaving the EU. To heck with what the British voters wanted. We know that we have to stay in the EU and work toward that global government. And it is rather alarming to see governments in many nations all across Europe reveal their anti-democratic leanings when it comes down to this issue of forcing everybody into a single global government. Story coming out of Investment Watch blog. Apparently George Soros is illegally bankrolling a campaign to amend Ireland's constitution. And as a result of that and so many other things, Nigel Farage has called on the European Union to investigate George Soros for political meddling. And they're very concerned about the Open Society Foundation has far more influence on elections across Europe and the United States. And investigators are probably going to start looking there as well. Now, over in Spain, the Catalan secessionist parties are poised to secure an absolute majority in the regional vote, according to the exit polls. And apparently it is a sweep. And so this pro-independence movement is heating up. Catalexit, I guess they're going to call it. So we'll see what happens there. Now, this part is getting silly. You know, with all of this screaming about sexual harassment this and racism that and the whining and the crying and all of it, this one takes the cake. Over at Esquire magazine, Rebecca Carroll actually came on out and said that because Charlie Rose did not sexually harass her, he must be racist, because after all, she's black and Charlie Rose did harass some white girls. So that's the latest thing. She's complaining that she wasn't sexually harassed and saying the guy's a racist because he didn't harass me. What a nation of whiners and thin skins we have turned into. Now, over at the University of Minnesota, they came out with so-called holiday guidelines in the name of inclusivity. And apparently Beckett, a nonprofit law firm that defends religious liberty, awarded the university's College of Food, Agricultural, and Natural Resources Sciences Respecting Religious Diversity event as this year's lowest dishonor, the 2017 Ebenezer Award for the most ridiculous affront to the Christmas and Hanukkah season. And apparently what this University of Minnesota College of Food and Agricultural so forth did, they came on out and said Christmas trees, menorahs, and the colors red, green, silver, and blue are inappropriate for college campuses during the holiday season because of some people who might be offended. Now that is ridiculous. That is absolutely one of the most ridiculous things I have ever heard. And we had that other story about how a school canceled their Christmas pageant because it might offend the non-Christians. And I know there's an issue of separation of church and state, but I think if you're my age, we're all sort of used to that idea of a school having a Christmas pageant. They even had one in the Charlie Brown Christmas. But it's like they're shutting down every single expression of cultural uniqueness with this claim that we're going to offend other cultures. And that's nonsense. Most people have a live and let live kind of approach to these things. Yes, there are some militant people who get upset when they see a Christmas tree or a cross, but they're a minority. Most people are just going to say, look, I'm going to observe my traditions here, and you observe your traditions there, and everything's going to be fine. But there's a war on our cultural identity right now. And obviously, the midwinter religious festivals are very important to a lot of people. Now, let's talk about the flu, because, as I said at the top of the show, this one was nasty. Claire is still dealing with it. I'm still running a little bit of a fever. We hope to be better by next Tuesday when we return to the air after the Christmas break. But I did get a lot of emails from listeners and readers who were saying, yeah, they'd gotten this one too, and it was really bad. And it was kind of funny because I'd been checking with the official numbers of flu infection here in Hawaii, and they always seem to lag some weeks behind for collating. And the CDC kept saying that Hawaii is having a moderate flu season. But more recently, some of the local numbers produced by our state health authorities are saying, yeah, it's surging up. This thing went through Claire's church. Everybody got it. Everybody got this thing. And there are some places all across the country where flu has become a major problem, Louisiana especially. And according to the Arizona Department of Health Services, their flu cases are up almost 800% from last year. And everybody is out there saying, well, look, I had the flu shot this year. Why did I get the flu? And after a great deal of hemming and hawing, the flu manufacturers will say, well, it's not always going to be effective. It's kind of a roll of the dice. But as I mentioned before, when we took Claire down to the local medical clinic, we ran into, in the waiting room, a nurse from Tripler Army Hospital. And she said, yeah, the flu was a big problem over there as well. And the reason it was a big problem is this year's flu shot was totally ineffective against this flu virus. Now, one issue may be the use of chicken eggs to culture the virus. We talked about that before. But the other one is, when they're getting ready for the flu season, like Christmas shopping season, I guess. They have to plan for it in advance. And so they're always guessing which strain of the flu they think will be this year's seasonal flu. And they don't always get it right. But it's big business, and they're going to keep on selling the stuff. Meanwhile, U.S. life expectancy has dropped for the second straight year. They're putting the blame on it on drug overdoses from prescription and illicit opioids. And we know there is a huge problem with opiates, and it's coming on in from Afghanistan. But I think it just may be that there are other factors as well, such as dangerous medications that don't work, and poor health conditions. And because of Obamacare and the high cost of medical care, people aren't getting medical care. All right, somebody just sent me an email asking if maybe the sudden plunge in Bitcoin prices was tied to the tax bill. And maybe, could very well be. Or it could be, like I said earlier, end of the year cashing out. People need a little extra money for Christmas shopping. But over the next commercial break, I'll take another look and see how it's performing. Now then, Mele Kalikimaka, which is Hawaiian for Merry Christmas. This is Christmas weekend. And if you have nothing else to talk about, why don't you call on in and tell us what you're asking Santa Claus to bring leave under the tree this coming Monday. And we did have a big winter storm blow through the islands. The tops of the mountains on Mauna Kea and Haleakala are covered rather heavily. So it's always kind of interesting when people think of Hawaii as a tropic paradise, the idea that we're getting snow on those peaks. And apparently there is now actually an open ski run up there. Now it doesn't have a chairlift or a tow line. You literally have to bring your own four-wheel vehicle, and somebody drives you up and then comes down and picks you up. But you can actually ski on the Hawaiian volcanoes in the morning and go surfing in the afternoon. There's a vacation for you. Speaking of skiing, the ski slopes in Connecticut are seeing their best conditions in years, and they got to open early. There's another indicator that human-caused global warming isn't happening. In fact, there was another article that came on out where they're saying that, again, as the original Farmer's Almanac said, winter arrived a little bit late. It's going to be a hard one. And so we'll be seeing that, I guess, in the coming months here. But apparently Powder Ridge is open as of today. And so they're looking forward to winter sports. That'll be good. Meanwhile, out in California, they're finally starting to get those wildfires under control, and Jerry Brown is out there still insisting that the fires were the result of human-caused global warming. It really is ridiculous. Now then, interesting little story out of ZDNet. The secret to being a great spy agency in the 21st century, incubating startups. And the article is all about how top-secret intelligence agencies are turning more and more to entrepreneurs to help build new tools. And there really isn't anything all that new about it. Certainly here in the United States, the CIA funds a lot of proprietary companies. It's not known that they're connected to CIA, but that is how they'll try and cultivate new technologies and new methods, or at least maintain a new cover. If you ever read the book Compromised, Clinton, Bush, and the CIA by Terry Reid, it's kind of hard to find. And it's all about that gun and drug running out of Arkansas in the 1980s. And Terry Reid mentions that one of the advantages of being inside that network is it is good for business. You can do business with each other. You're making all these connections through the intelligence agency, getting all these hookups. And it's really quite an advantage. and I would say probably an unfair advantage for those businesses who don't want to get tangled up with the spook shops. Now, getting on back to cryptocurrencies, apparently Starbucks has discovered, been forced to confirm, that the free Wi-Fi in at least one of its Argentina stores has been infecting its customers' electronic devices with a malicious code to mine cryptocurrencies. And apparently the issue was reported earlier this month by an executive of a New York-based technology company who noticed that while he got coffee in a Starbucks store in Buenos Aires, his laptop received a malicious cryptocurrency mining code. Now, right now, that seems to be the big deal, is infecting everybody's machines with cryptocurrency miners. And it's stealing. They're stealing your resources, your computer, your electricity, your memory to make money. And they're not being very careful about it because according to Kaspersky Labs, there's another malicious software, very sophisticated. It's low-API. And apparently, one of the things it does, it's a cryptocurrency miner. And apparently, it is so demanding on the smartphone, it can destroy the smartphone. And Kaspersky deliberately infected an Android phone with this cryptocurrency miner. And in just 2 days, the battery swelled and cracked the case and destroyed the phone. So it can literally melt your phone down. It also has all kinds of other malware, such as botnet capability, keylogger. Malicious malware is out of control, and nobody seems to want to do anything about it except for companies like Kaspersky, who has now been officially banned from protecting the computers of the U.S. government. Apparently, there's a zero-day remote root exploit has been disclosed in AT&T DirecTV WVB devices. A lot of names and characters in there trying to explain what it all is. But apparently, it's an unpatched zero-day vulnerability in the firmware. And apparently, they've been trying to get the device manufacturer to patch this for the last several months. We're going to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Please join us on the air, 800-313-9443. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Pardon me. And we're talking about this zero-day remote kit that comes with DirecTV. And the specific problem is a core component of the Genie DVR system, which is shipped free of cost with DirecTV, but it can be easily exploited by hackers to gain root access and take full control of the device, placing millions of people who've signed up to DirecTV service at risk. Now, I'm not sure what this entails. I mean, ordering pay-per-views and charging somebody else for them. But it almost seems that in making our devices so complex, we've allowed them to escape our control. They're so complicated, people can't understand them. They can't figure out what's going on inside them, and that's why they're vulnerable to these hacking efforts. And I'm very concerned about Google's latest research where they're having an artificially intelligent computer design newer artificially intelligent computers, because you're definitely going to have something that no human being understands. I think simpler is better. I really do. I think simpler is better. Apparently, the U.S. Army is getting ready to send teams of cyber warriors to the battlefields, and basically saying that the Army is going to be taking the offensive against enemy computer networks. And the Army's mission is generally to attack and destroy, but basically said the cyber troops have a slightly different goal. And by the way, one of these groups is stationed right here in Hawaii. And it's basically saying, how do we influence by non-kinetic means? How can I reach up and create confusion and gain control? Well, I'd like to turn these boys loose on some of these ransomware writers. Let's hunt them down. Now, I love this story. Okay, the Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals up in San Francisco got tired of the homeless people hanging out in front of their building, so they bought a security robot to chase away the homeless people. They love animals. They're going to take care of the poor little helpless animals, but human beings, no, get out of here. We don't want you. Well, apparently the humans fought back, and they attacked the security robot. They knocked it over, poured barbecue sauce on all the sensors. I don't know what that was supposed to represent, and smeared it with feces. So I guess that one didn't work out too well. But again, this is the SPCA. Aren't they supposed to be like humanitarians? You know, care about, suffering of all life forms? Or is it only cute little kittens and puppies that rate in their books? I think maybe that might be the case here. All right, we're coming up here on the top of the hour, and again, our phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and I'm going to need some phone calls because we're running out of things to talk about today. We'll be right back after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome to our show, hour number 2, and the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we have a phone call. So let's go to James in Ohio. Aloha, James. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi. I want to talk about the flu first, and 2 things you can do to help if drinking colloidal silver isn't working very well. You can put that in a bottle that produces a fine mist and breathe that in as deeply as possible. Number 2, plain old niacin, not flush-free, not time-release. If you take enough niacin to cause a flush, it is pretty much guaranteed to help you. Say, for somebody who doesn't take it regularly, take somewhere between 300 and 400 milligrams, and also N-acetylcysteine, which breaks up proteins like mucus.
Okay.
Also on YouTube comments, I started noticing in about September of 2016 that I was shadow banned on Alex Jones' YouTube channel, and also Stefan Molyneux's and Sargon of Akkad. And in the ensuing months, that list has grown to include Mark Dice and Steven Crowder. And I'd say it's because I raise contentious issues like that the Communist Party USA publishes a periodical called Jewish Affairs. But I can raise these issues on other channels, and I am not shadow banned. And for the uninitiated, shadow banning means as long as you're logged in, it appears that your comments post, but if you log out and look at them, they disappear. So only you can see them when you're logged in. So
that's to hide the fact of the censorship. You think your posts are getting on out there, but they aren't really.
Yeah. Well, for those that would say that this is purely YouTube, I would say that's akin to the theory that the LAPD murdered OJ's cheating wife for him. You know, like I said, these comments are not getting censored on other channels. So I would say Jones and Molyneux are working with YouTube to censor more alt-right comments, while at the same time, crying to high heaven about censorship.
Censorship on them is bad. Censorship on us is good. And, it's not like they're hiding it. They've been talking about all these, they're bringing on these teams of people to screen for fake news, and there have been apparently some embarrassments. And I think Google actually just dropped one of its programs because of all the false positives it was getting.
Right. Well, what I'm saying is a long time before the algorithms and the botnets and all that they were using. That what I'm saying is, it appears that people like Alex Jones, Stefan Molyneux, Sargon of Akkad, Mark Dice, and Steven Crowder were working with YouTube in order to censor comments they didn't like, which are anti-Zionist comments and criticism of these people in particular. You'll notice there are not a lot of criticisms of them in their YouTube comments.
Yeah.
So, if true, this means they're complete hypocrites, because much of what they do is cry about YouTube censorship.
Yes.
And this has been going on a lot longer. Like I said, September of 2016 is when I first started noticing it.
Well, I think maybe it's time to start, going back and exploring some of the new startup replacements and get away from these established giants, because they've obviously been compromised.
Right.
I don't use Facebook anymore, for example. And, I put all my work into whatreallyhappened.com, and people can come there to see what it is I have to say.
By the way, who was the comedian? Oh, yeah, Gallagher. He said one time, you ever wonder why one hand works really well and the other isn't worth a blank? Well, I have to wonder, why does YouTube work so well for videos, and like the other video hosting channels don't work worth a blank, They're all slow loading and...
Well, YouTube has the hardware. YouTube has the hardware. They've got vast server farms, and I'm sure they're already going to be plugged in with the advantages of the end of net neutrality, that they're going to have a fast channel. They want to stay the primary video repository in order to maintain control. And so they've got a lot of money behind them.
One thing I have noticed is that other people do see my comments when it's a live stream on Alex Jones or David Knight. But if it's one of their regular YouTube channels, they disappear. But I can talk about things like that, and things like that Karl Marx's father was a rabbi on the Truth Stream Media or Corbett Report, and although they don't agree with those type of comments, they do not censor them.
Well, that's a good thing.
It's like I always say, the alt-right can win all the arguments, but the alt-right will win the war. And I'd say that, like a lot of your callers have commented recently, I say war is on its way one way or another. There's just no way this is going to continue on like this, economically, culturally, socially. It's like there's a certain point at which you don't have to be an architect to see that a bridge is going to fall.
Yes. No, I'm in agreement. I'm seeing so many warning indications of a Soviet Union-style collapse coming for the United States. And frankly, I think the world would see that as a good thing. If you look at that UN vote on Jerusalem, I mean, this was pretty much the rest of the world standing up to the United States and saying, we've really had it with you guys shoving us around.
Right. The rest of the world is not wrong about everything. Neither is the left. And I don't know how the left took Palestine as its private issue. It should never have been that way. It seems like we always have to choose between the devil and the deep blue sea. We've got the left. They're pretty much wrong about most everything except Palestine and Israel. How did that happen? Wasn't that usually the purview of the right?
Well,
to be somewhat
the two different groups, the conservatives and the liberals, or Democrats and Republicans, every campaign, they're dancing around on issues, trying to find the most issues that will generate the most votes for themselves. And over time, they can actually trade positions with each other.
Yeah. I did want to mention one last thing. I have heard advertisements on your show for something called the Energy Cleaner. I hate that new agey sounding name, but it's one of the other hosts. I guess it's his thing on Republic Broadcasting. However, I've been experimenting with this for about 13 years, and yeah, it shouldn't do a thing, but it is very valid. I've talked to hundreds of people who have had illnesses cured, and I continue to research with it. I credit it with one effect I've noticed. I have not had a virus of any kind since October of 2006. Mm-hmm. And I used to get flus and colds and stomach viruses, pretty much all the time. So, but yeah, it's definitely a valid thing. It should be as common as cell phones.
Well, again, Claire and I, by and large, we're very healthy, and we don't tend to get sick. It's just this one, wherever it came from, it's real nasty. And one of the downsides about living here in Hawaii is that if there's any kind of an outbreak of any kind of a disease anywhere in the Pacific Basin, 24 hours later, it's on this rock.
Right. Also the travel to and from.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's about all I have for you. Thank you for your time, and keep up the good work.
Well, thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. And the phone lines are open, and we're going to get back to the world of computers. A lot of people are calling this Son of Stuxnet, but it's actually been dubbed Triton, or Trisis. And this is another piece of software designed to interfere with computerized industrial controllers. And apparently this malware has been designed to target Triconex safety instrumented system controllers made by Schneider Electric. This is an autonomous control system that independently monitors the performance of critical systems and takes immediate actions automatically if a dangerous state is detected. In other words, somebody has come up with malware that is designed to disable industrial safety systems. And apparently researchers from the Mandiant division of security firm FireEye published a report on this yesterday, suggesting this might originate with a state sponsor who would use the Triton malware to cause physical damage to a facility or organization. So out there again. Now, as you know, the FCC, after much Sturm und Drang, voted to repeal net neutrality. We're being assured it is all for the benefit of the little people. We know otherwise, of course. What was really interesting was somebody leaked an email where the FCC's own chief technology officer thought that gutting net neutrality is going to harm the public. But again, the internet service providers just lavished huge amounts of money all over Congress. And what those with huge amounts of money want, those with huge amounts of money get. Now, the fight is not over because apparently states are now taking steps to bring back net neutrality, at least within their state borders. And we're seeing this in California, New York, and Washington, where they're saying they're going to battle the feds to make sure all online traffic is treated equally. So good for them. We're going to take another phone call here. Neil in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha. Merry Christmas, everyone. Michael.
Thank you.
I had this conversation with family during Thanksgiving based on the sexual harassment thing that's going on that went from movie stars to media personnel. A lot of these people were donors to that leftist socialist agenda and mouthpieces for it. So essentially, I saw it starting there. Now I hear the EPA people are jumping ship, leaving, same with a lot of other of these programs that, have been set up year after year after year. The draining of the swamp might be happening covertly, kind of grassroots-like, letting themselves walk away.
Well, it would certainly be nice, and I had noticed that there did seem to be a lot of these resignations of some of these players. But I don't know that we have enough facts to really make an accurate determination on that. I'd like to see some of these agencies literally shut down, and EPA would be one of them, along with the Bureau of Land Management. And you need to remember that the Environmental Protection Agency was started by Richard Nixon as a dodge. It had nothing to do with the environment and everything to do with allowing the U.S. government to start commandeering or confiscating public lands and even some private lands to pledge as collateral on government borrowing following Richard Nixon's ending of gold convertibility, the Nixon shock. All of a sudden the world was aware that the U.S. probably didn't have as much gold as they thought, and so Nixon wanted to take these huge tracts of land with natural resources on them and pledge them as collateral for the government borrowing. And the only way to get that past the American people was to wrap it up in something that said, hey, we're saving this to be good to the environment down the road. And that's where EPA came from. Well, with the U.S. dollar already crashing and the U.S. government hopelessly in debt, the EPA has made so many bad mistakes as well, along with the Bureau of Land Management. And I think there's a need for environmental protectionism, but these guys aren't doing it.
I do agree with what you're saying, but to see them kind of jumping ship on their own, realizing they're not going to have that power anymore, to have the media fall apart like they are, the entertainment industry, which pushed all of this agenda, pre-years during Republican years also.
Yes.
I think it's kind of the beginning of the draining without it being popularized or saying, look, this is what we're doing. It's just happening. Now I see so much more of, well, they're going to reinvestigate Hillary and Uranium One. They're going to investigate the FBI investigating Hillary. So I think a lot of these people that were in positions are no longer in positions, and now people who are willing to put their things on the table are pushing these forward and might be getting it done. Knock on wood, I still don't like a lot of things he's done or do, but I'm seeing something I don't think I or a lot of us have ever seen.
Well, I hope you're right, and I hope they're not just going through the motions of saying, see, we had an investigation and we found nothing, because that's what they did to us the first time. So this is a classic case of the proof will be in the pudding, and I'm going to wait until the pudding is done before I pass judgment on whether this is real or not. But in the larger context, looking at all these people who are leaving and the revelations about sexual harassment, it's clear that our social fabric is unraveling, and a lot of what people grew up trusting and believing in are now seen to be untrustworthy. And there's a huge crisis of credibility, crisis of faith, if you want to call it, with the American people and the corporate media and the government. And there's not going to be any way of turning that around anytime soon.
Well said, Michael. Aloha. Merry Christmas, everyone, and Happy New Year's.
Aloha, Mele Kalikimaka. And we're going to switch on over to Clay in Alabama. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, I'm on the internet for several hours every day, and I love to read the news. And I've been looking for the jury makeup of that jury that acquitted, what was that guy's name, Zaray? That illegal immigrant that killed Kate Stinney?
Yeah.
Are you familiar with that case? Hello?
Yeah. And
And I have not seen one word of the makeup of that jury. Not one, and I have actively looked hard. I don't remember this before.
You know, I haven't seen that either. I haven't seen that either. I mean, it was an appalling case here, and again, this was heavily politicized, and I think there's no question that political pressure was brought to bear on the judge and on the court to not find this guy guilty because it would be fodder for the people who advocate for stronger, better controlled borders. But I was doing a search here and looking for this information, and apparently over at UCSD, apparently posters were put up about this woman who was shot, Kate Steinle, and they're being denounced as racist. So that tells us that there is this huge agenda regarding illegal immigration. This woman got shot and killed by an illegal immigrant. They're putting up the poster and they're saying, "Oh, you're being racist. You're being racist." No, 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 no. You know something? Illegal isn't a race. Let's get that out of the way right up front. Okay, we're not talking about a race. We're talking about a crime. In this case, multiple occurrences of walking into this country, a crime of having an illegal firearm, and a crime of killing somebody with it. Race has got nothing to do with it. But everybody's all on board with this open borders globalist nonsense, and anything that reflects badly on it, they're trying to silence and shut it down. We're seeing that all over Europe, where their media are being told not to report on the ethnicity of criminals. We got to take a break for commercials. Clay, stay on the phone. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking with Clay in Alabama about the murder of Kate Steinle by an undocumented immigrant who had been deported many times before, was in the country, had an illegal gun, pulled the trigger, and shot this woman. His defense was he was not shooting at her. The bullet ricocheted. But given the distance between the shooter and the victim, the gun was being fired horizontally. And it did anger quite a few people that this individual was acquitted of homicide. When anybody who understands guns and guns laws know when you pull that trigger, you are legally responsible for where that bullet goes. So apparently this thing over the photos of Kate, that's a new thing. This is just like the last couple of days where somebody put up these photos of Kate at UCSD, and immediately they're denounced, they're racist. How dare you do that? Anyway, Clay, anything else?
Yeah, well, I've been a news hound for over 40 years, and this is the first trial I've seen that was high profile enough to make national news. They didn't give the demographics of the jury. I haven't been able to find out anything about and I've really been looking. And it surprises me, it hasn't been pointed out, by somebody that has a national audience or something. But anyway, I'd like to point that out, and maybe other people think about it too. Have a nice day and a Merry Christmas.
All right, Clay, Merry Christmas as well. And I'm seeing this one article written by an alternate juror in the murder case. And basically, well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to go ahead and post this. This alternate juror's name was Phil Van Stockham. I would have a question here, and I don't know if this is the case or not, but this is a reasonable question. Are undocumented immigrants allowed to serve jury duty? Because that would definitely be a factor. Anyway, getting on back here. In the world of computers and independent media, apparently the UK Tribunal Court ruled yesterday that WikiLeaks is in fact a media organization and is therefore entitled to all the legal protections of a media organization. And that is a tremendous victory for the independent media, because the corporate media has been trying to create this idea that we're just a bunch of bloggers and hobbyists, and we don't have big expensive studios and fabulous salaries and staff and everything. Therefore, we can't really be a media organization. Therefore, we should not be allowed to go on out and basically broadcast to the public over the internet. But again, going on back to freedom of speech and that First Amendment, there were never any qualifiers on it. There were never any filters on it saying that you had to be above a certain size. And clearly when you see things like this happening, it's very obvious that the independent media is in fact winning the war for the minds of America. And, of course, we cheated. We're using the truth, and that gives us a little bit of an unfair advantage over all those corporate media outlets who are paid big bucks to be habitual liars. Now, I'm getting some email on this situation. Somebody wrote on in and said, shadow ban is what InfoWars does ever since Israel bought Discus. And apparently there was another censorship stink regarding Silk and Diamonds, which is this pair of ladies who do a lot of commentary here. And the rest is Merry Christmas and blah, blah, blah. Now, this one's a little off topic, but I want to fit this one in here because it's kind of bizarre. And it has to do with gift cards. A lot of people will solve their holiday shopping problems with gift cards. And apparently somebody ran into a big problem regarding Home Depot gift cards, because apparently they can only be used at the Home Depot stores. They are not accepted at HomeDepot.com. Where it gets to be a problem is if you want to buy something at HomeDepot.com, which is not available in the retail brick-and-mortar outlets. But apparently somebody was very unhappy that they basically spent $500 on these gift cards and could not be used. And again, this is a Home Depot gift card, and HomeDepot.com will not accept them. I don't understand what the thinking is behind that. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Well, apparently iPhone is now facing another row over racism. The iPhone 10, apparently their wonderful little 3D face mapping technology is having a great deal of problems when dealing with Asians, specifically Chinese users. And it was discovered by a customer who bought his wife a phone and discovered that his son was able to unlock it using the facial recognition. We're going to take a break for commercials. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And over the commercial break, I did a little digging, and I did find some information about the jury in the Kate Steinle case. 6 men, 6 women. 3 of them were immigrants, or are immigrants, and 2 of them were tech workers. Jurors were between 20s and 30s with educational degrees from high school diplomas up to PhDs. So cross-section of San Francisco. But 3 of them were immigrants. And apparently, according to this other article I was looking at, part of the defense in this case is the illegal immigrant claimed he had found the gun where he was sitting and picked it up and it accidentally fired. That was his story. So, but again, if he hadn't been there in the first place, that woman would still be alive. So we're getting on back to the computers here. And again, we were talking before the commercial break about the iPhone 10, where its 3D facial mapping system is not working out very well. Remember when they did the product launch and it failed to unlock the phone? And now apparently for Chinese people, it's having trouble distinguishing between individuals. So apparently Apple's customer service hotline got a call saying that he'd bought the phone for his wife, but discovered the teenage son could unlock it. I think they should have quit with that fingerprint scanner. That works pretty good. Yes, I understand it can be hacked. Ultimately, everything can be hacked, which is why you shouldn't have anything all that critical on a device you take out of the home. Okay, now, here's a bizarre story. This came out of Zero Hedge. There is a new theory about the cause of the opioid crisis here in the United States of America. Now, my theory is that having gone into Afghanistan and started the opium poppies up again, they got to sell it somewhere, and so it's pouring into this country, just like it was pouring into this country from Vietnam during that war. But apparently there's this scientist, Angus Deaton, Nobel laureate, economist, basically saying that he thinks the cause of the opioid crisis is the complete economic destruction of the white working class. And instead of dealing with their angst with more traditional chemicals like alcohol, that they're turning to opiates, either illicit ones or what they can get from their doctor on a prescription. Now here's an interesting little story, and this goes back to something we were talking about earlier in the week when we had callers talking about electric cars and how wonderful they are. And the question is, today, the electricity for electric cars is still being primarily generated through petroleum-powered generating stations and fission reactors. But there is a new development, and it's in the realm of what's called hot fusion. Now, fusion, of course, is replicating the process that lets the sun convert hydrogen to helium with a tremendous amount of energy produced as a result. And hot fusion, there have been several experimental methods of trying to get that to work, magnetic bottles, tokamak reactors, and so forth. But apparently, this latest approach uses lasers, very powerful lasers, and there had been an earlier attempt of that. But apparently, this system fuses hydrogen and boron using powerful bursts of lasers, and there will be no radioactive fuel or toxic waste. And it would produce temperatures about 200 times the temperature of the sun's core. And apparently there have been breakthroughs in laser technology that will allow that to operate. Now that would make the electric-based economy feasible. You could have electric cars, electric motorcycles, electric whatever, and a clean source for that electricity. Electric cars are cool, but by themselves, they're not going to save the earth and the environment, because that electricity has to come from someplace, and that's usually an oil-fired or nuclear reactor. And I imagine if you put solar cells all over the top of your house, you could charge your car, but I don't know how long you'd have to charge it on solar cells to be able to drive it. I remember when the original Top Gear did a show on the electric cars, and they kept hitting the point that you would go so many miles and then you'd have to charge overnight to go any further. Now, fortunately, that may be changing along with some new developments in batteries. But I think electric cars are cool. Okay, here's a good one. Apparently, over in Syria, the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, is now admitting that the latest outbreak of polio in Syria was caused by polio vaccines. Their attempt to protect the children against polio has backfired. They infected more children with the disease rather than saving them. So it is a reminder that, like so much of our other technology, or medical technology, or GMO technology, the stuff is being put on out there recklessly. It's not fully tested. And partly, of course, it's because of the blind faith of the vaccine industry. They see themselves as saviors. We're making people better. They literally don't want to look or cannot see that some of the vaccines are, first of all, not helping, and some are actually harmful. It's almost like a religious cult. Some years ago, Claire and I had an acquaintance that she was a nurse, and we sort of handheld her through the suicide of her husband, which was not pleasant. And we were all, buddy-buddy, and then eventually we got onto the discussion about vaccines, and Claire and I expressed our concerns, and this lady just literally blew up. How can you say such things? Vaccines are wonderful. And that was basically the end of our friendship. at that point. So we have the polio vaccine giving kids polio in Syria. And I seem to recall there was another story about the exact same thing happening in some other part of the world last year. The media doesn't give these things a lot of coverage. And, of course, we have two other current vaccine scandals the press won't cover. One I've already talked about. And that's where the vaccines for flu aren't very effective because of the way they're manufactured. The vaccine is produced using chicken eggs, and they will use the chicken eggs to culture or to grow the virus. And this virus, when it is exposed to these chicken egg proteins, mutates, which means it's no longer the same virus that is causing the flu this year. And basically, based on data from Australia, which has already had their flu season, this is from Fierce Pharma, scientists are saying that the season's flu shot is only 10% effective. And the reason for such a low level of protection lies in the method by which the majority of flu vaccines are made in eggs. Now, 10% effectiveness, that's ridiculous. So, now, the second scandal is unfolding over in the Philippines, where drug giant Sanofi's Dangvexia, given to prevent dengue fever, is facing enormous pushback from government officials who have stopped the national vaccination campaigns after thousands of children have already received the shot. The reason? Safety. And that's because the pharmaceutical company basically warned that Dangvexia can cause more serious infections in those who previously hadn't had exposure to the virus. In other words, they came on out and said, you get the vaccine to protect you from dengue fever. But if you get dengue fever anyway, it's going to be a lot worse because of the vaccine. Doesn't sound like it's a very effective vaccine to me. So we keep seeing these stories where there'll be a mumps outbreak and they'll say, oh, get your mumps vaccine. Then we find out the people who got sick had the mumps vaccine. All right, we're going to grab ourselves a phone call. Brian in Georgia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Glad you and Claire are on the mend. I don't know if you covered it already, but I have to say that the judge declaring a mistrial in the Bundy case was almost as big a shock as the love fest that was happening on the White House steps the other day when the tax bill passed, and you had all these establishment Republicans, you know, and Trump that were bitter foes just months ago, or now they just can't say enough nice things about each other.
Well, they're circling the wagons for the midterm elections next year, and because Trump is going to be the president no matter what happens in the elections, the Republicans are going to circle around him. They recognize that he is very popular, and they want to ride his coattails into the next term.
Yeah, well, it seemed like I was sort of hearing, like when Tim Scott came up to speak and he said, you know, trillions for distressed neighborhoods. I guess that's the new buzzword for inner city neighborhoods. And then Murkowski talking about, you know, making, you know, unleashing oil production in Alaska. It sounded like maybe Trump's becoming more of a politician, less of a businessman. He's just making deals behind the scenes to get his bills passed. And it's like, well, this is how you get your bills passed. You make deals with the you know, establishment in Congress.
Well, you know, it was admitted that some of the provisions in the new tax bill were specifically aimed at specific members of Congress in order to buy their vote.
Yeah, definitely. One other thing I was just, a topic you were just touching on, since I live in the, you know, the world headquarters of Home Depot, I know this statistic is a couple of years old, but I know that unredeemed gift cards were a $42 million profit center in 1 year for Home Depot, so I can understand why they're making it so difficult to redeem them, because unredeemed gift cards are, they make some serious money off of.
It's free money. It's free money. Yeah, it's just free money out of thin air, because most people who use a gift card, they'll use up part of the balance, and then there's so little left on the card, they just figure it's not worth bothering anymore. And that's basically free money that was being given to the issuing company. There were actually, I recall, I think about 5-6 years ago, a couple of businesses started up. They would advertise on TV to send in your unused gift cards, and they would send you back part of the cash that was on them, and then they would split the difference. But I guess they didn't make it. There wasn't enough cash flow there.
Yeah, they folded their tents and disappeared in the dark of night, man.
Yeah, I mean, why bother with?
Well, that's all I had.
Okay, well, thanks an awful lot, and I agree with you about the judge declaring a mistrial in the Bundy case. That was definitely very good news here. But again, what's the point of a gift card? Just send cash. Anyway, all right, now. The phone lines are open here. There we are. Now then, as you know, I'm a science fanatic, astronomy and so forth, and there's this interesting article that came out of the New Zealand Herald where scientists have found this bizarre bacteria down in Antarctica. And apparently it's one of the most extreme environments on our planet. Freezing temperatures, limited carbon, nitrogen and water availability, along with strong ultraviolet radiation, and yet they found something alive in this environment. And so it's basically time to rethink what we're going to be looking for as alien life when we go to other worlds here. Because I think we're being species chauvinistic, if you will, in that we always tend to think of life as human life. Our temperature range, our chemistry, we need oxygen, we need water, and life may not be like that. Extremophiles show that life evolves to fit the environment that it evolves in. And so we may find life that is so completely different to us. We shouldn't not go looking for it, like in those methane pools on Titan. That would be some place that would be interesting to look for. It's like this search for other planets, and they have the so-called Goldilocks zone where you've got liquid water, and therefore this is where we focus our search for life. It's a good place to look for life. It's not the only one. Again, don't have to have water as long as you have some kind of a liquid mixing medium, like methane or ammonia, and a source of energy to drive it all, to cause chemical reactions until sooner or later, if you wait long enough, you get a self-replicating molecule, and that is the beginning of life. So I'm convinced there's tons of life out there. I mean, I know from personal experience there are bacteria on Mars. So anyway, we're coming up here on another commercial break. Phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And unfortunately, the lovely Lady Claire has had to bow out for hour number 3, so we could use some more phone calls. But she did send me her list of talking points, and we'll be getting into that as soon as we come back at the top of the hour. So meanwhile, let's get on back here. I can't do that one on the air here. Over in California, the animal shelter there is going to put all dogs on a vegan diet. Now that is really getting silly. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, coming up on the top of the hour here. And more news from the world of computers. Apparently, Nissan Canada has been hacked, and apparently up to 1 million customers have had their data exposed. So it's it really is out of control. All right. Apparently, if you're a Linux fan, bad news. Ubuntu 17 has been pulled because apparently the Linux operating system wrecks laptop BIOSes and Intel kernel drivers as well. So that's been halted here. Here's a story about the personal assistants in the home, and I would never have one of these. We already know that they're listening to you constantly, and the information is being siphoned off somewhere for marketing or who knows what, and possibly for nefarious purposes. But this is a good example of how this technology is not really artificially intelligent just yet. And apparently over in Dallas, Texas, there was a 6-year-old girl talking to the Echo Dot about cookies and a dollhouse, and Amazon's virtual assistant mistook the conversation as an order for the items and wound up with $170 dollhouse and 4 pounds of cookies. So, and yeah, you can have all kinds of problems. They can hear something on TV and think that that's an order. I think it's a lot more trouble than they're really worth until they are truly intelligent enough to understand what you're saying is an actual order. But it's programmed to generate sales. It's going to err on the side of pushing that cash register button. Alrighty, so we're coming up here on the top, and I'm going to start here on Claire's talking point list. And again, the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Washington State has declared that Comcast stole at least $73 million from subscribers over 5 years. Now, that is a lot of money to be stealing here. And Washington State is suing Comcast over mis-selling of its service protection plan. This is a nearly useless insurance plan that was sold to customers as a way to avoid having to pay fees for faults in the Comcast cable infrastructure. And according to Washington State, most of the benefits claimed by Comcast for SPP were already free services provided by the company. And the things the policy actually did cover were surrounded by a tangle of impossible-to-navigate exceptions that made it nearly impossible to use it. Comcast has a vile reputation. And, of course, now they're partnered up with Spectrum Internet. And they have been sued in New York for not delivering the bandwidth customers were charged for. And I wish we could get the same thing going here in Hawaii. All right, we're going to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. And for those of you watching on BAM User, the gorgeous creature is not sitting next to me today. She really gave it her best, wanted to be on the air today, but just can't really do it. And before we start taking some more phone calls here, I have a comment about the United States Postal Service because I have just been informed again of a package that was sent to me that has gone wandering off someplace else. And this is getting to be a regular thing. And if we don't have a reliable postal service as a nation, that's impacting our lives. It's going to impact our Christmases. Right now I've got 3 packages out there that seem to have vanished into thin air. And nobody seems to know what to do about it. The post office makes you wait 10 days before they'll even accept a report. And I've never filed a report with the post office that ever had a positive outcome. So I'm very, very unhappy that all of this stuff goes missing. I mean, who knows? Somebody may have sent me a check for $5 million and it went missing. Like that story where UPS lost this guy's inheritance and they offered to pay back the $32 shipping fee. The country's breaking down. It is really, really breaking down. All righty, let's take a phone call. Alan in Australia. G'day, mate. What's going on down there? Alan, are you there? Okay, I guess we're not going to get to Alan?
We lost Alan.
We lost Alan. Let's go to Chris in Las Vegas. Aloha, Chris. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael, and happy holidays to you. Since you had spoke about the credit card or the gift card situation, I thought I'd share an experience I had with the Walmart Financial Services gift card, where I had specifically requested could I use it to make online purchases from other than Walmart. Oh, yes, they assured. So I bought a $300 card. I had some purchases I wanted to make, and being deprived of access to banking facilities because of being a non-citizen state national as opposed to a U.S. citizen, I had little recourse. So I bought the card with good faith after asking the right questions for $300, and then immediately went home to try to make the online purchase of some supplements I had sought for from Swanson's, and was highly chagrined to find that it was merely a gift card and not a debit card, as I had been misled to believe it was able to be used for. And so I could not get my money back from Walmart once it was put into their card. Now, I have overcome the inconvenience by being able to use it for making point-of-sale purchases and have it down to about $100 at this point. But I found their misrepresentations to be very disconcerting and plain deceptive, and that sounds like false claims activity and theft by deception effectually, although it's not completely theft because I was able to get some cursory value out of the funds I had put up into their gift card.
Well, here's the question I have, and that is I can't imagine why, if I were to go down to a store and buy a gift card, that I could not turn around and use that card myself. And I don't understand why that was not possible for you.
Me neither, but that was their policy, they claimed. Once they had it, it was theirs, and you had to use their card for their gifts. Maybe they were implying, and I was supposed to be gifted with the ability to perceive what they were implying, although I didn't know. It was not clear to me that they could only use them to buy online gifts from Walmart on the gift card, perhaps. I haven't tried to do that, nor would I.
No, I can see what the issue there is. The misunderstanding is you thought that the Walmart gift card would be valid places other than Walmart, and I can understand why, Walmart might not allow that. And it's another reason why I don't like gift cards is it constrains the people that you're giving it to a specific place of business, as opposed to just a generic prepaid gift card from like one of the major credit card vendors, where you can, in fact, use that anywhere.
And in the just-in-time days of Walmart and Amazon, having those cards is, it's not nearly a complete bad idea, but it's very inconvenient to be locked in once you've made your purchase of the gift card for a substantial investment. Now, on to the Bundy situation. The reason for the dismissal by Gloria Navarro was the egregious abuse of prosecutorial discretion and citing Brady Act violations, 7 each, and Giglio versus U.S., which has to do with prosecutorial egregious abuse of discretion,
yes,
where they withheld inculpatory and exculpatory evidence for over 3 years while keeping these men unlawfully locked up and detained without having been convicted. And there was never any other victim other than Lavoy Finicum, who was murdered at the hands of the BLM, FBI, and the Oregon State Police. Perhaps Juan Huruchi seems to be one of the preeminent involved individuals, and another BLM agent that was dismissed for materially misrepresenting statements on his post-shooting event form, claiming he did not shoot when the facts show that he did.
Yeah,
so this is a very, very unusual situation that brings another black eye with another vindication of the Bundy group, who were really just trying to restore lawful government and to curtail and hold back this out-of-control federal agency that operates under the Administrative Procedures Act, 5 United States Code 551 et sec. Therefore, they're not under the laws of the U.S., but by the POTUS's executive privileges, they have been created and they have run amok, much as FDR evinced them to being from Philip Drew Administrator's writings of his illusions of the administrative world being his idea of perfection.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm glad the Bundys was declared a mistrial, and I hope they're not going to waste time trying them again. But, yeah, we're seeing more and more of this behavior become visible to the general public, and I phrase it that way because we know that the FBI and BLM and all these organizations have been behaving like this all along. It's just that in the days before the independent media, they were able to hide it from the vast majority of Americans who would accept whatever official story was coming out over corporate media and say, oh yeah, Bundys are bad, our guys are good, and that's really the end of it. But we know that there have been a tremendous number of major injustices throughout history brought about by ambitious prosecutors or political expediency. We know that James Earl Ray was framed for the assassination of Martin Luther King. Same thing with Oswald. We know that the FBI covered up the murder of White House Deputy Counsel Vince Foster, and so forth and so on.
This insanity of these agency bad acts, Baker's Green Acres, another one that was pretty preeminent, and Wedding Cake Cookers, I think it was Utah, but that could be wrong about the state. They're just out of control. They've all been weaponized by the Obama administration, and the holdovers within the agencies seem to be carrying out the same left-wing extreme policies of complete obliteration of people's rights to exist without having the government's nose up their kazoo. So thank you so very, very much. Merry Christmas, and thank you, Michael.
Well, thank you very much. Merry Christmas to you, too. We're going to let you go and do a quick shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. The issue may be more than just simply ideology of getting people used to having the government poke into everything that they do. In the case of the Bundy Ranch, and in the case of the Malheur Wildlife Reserve, these appear to have involved attempts to basically take control of land and transfer it into new ownership without the permission of the existing owners. Certainly in the Wildlife Sanctuary, that one seems to be neck deep in the Uranium One deal. So we need to keep an eye on that. That ideology is one thing, but if somebody's out to make a major fast buck, that's usually the primary motive. All right, let's go back to the phones here. Tony in La La Land, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I call in about once a year just to wish you and Claire a very merry, happy holiday.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So, Merry Christmas to you, too, and Happy New Year.
Thank you. Calling this one 1776. Everyone seems to be asking, jumping on board this Bitcoin thing. And here in La La Land, I guess weed is officially going to be legal on the 1st. And I was wondering if you or one of the listeners know of a good penny stock.
I'm not a financial planner here. I did, on one of the previous commercials, take a quick look, and Bitcoin is headed back up again. So there may be a recovery there. As far as picking stocks, I have no idea. I'm the last person on earth to ask for any kind of investment advice.
Okay. Well, thanks anyways. I'll be listening, but I won't be calling in.
All right. Well, thanks an awful lot then. We're going to switch over to Jim in Chicago. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. Do you have any comments about what Donald Trump did on Wednesday, which was the last day of Hanukkah? He let this Orthodox rabbi out of prison. He was sentenced to 27 years in prison for money laundering, mail fraud, and hiring illegals. This is the guy that ran that kosher meat plant in Aiea back in 2009.
Yes.
Now, from what I read, it was a favor to the Jewish lobby and the Jewish community. And I asked myself, wait a second now. Now, Donald Trump, from day one, he's always been criticizing illegals and people that hire illegals, but yet and still, he lets this guy out of jail.
I agree. It's a stunning hypocrisy. And very obviously, somebody pulled Donald Trump's leash on this, possibly Sheldon Adelson. Yeah, and it just tragically seems to be the way these things operate. I mean, I'm glad this guy did spend, I think it was 8 years in prison, but
right.
You know, basically just let him out, just to let him out.
Right. Not only that, though, you had Democrats like Nancy Pelosi and some other Democrats wanting this guy out of jail. And I said to myself,
hello?
yeah. No,
okay, your phone connection is cutting in and out.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay, sorry about that. I asked myself, why are Democrats wanting this guy out and putting pressure onto Donald Trump as far as getting him out of jail? I don't understand that part.
Well, as I said before, everybody is already starting to plan for next year's midterm elections, and that means sucking up to the people who've got the money, and that means people like Sheldon Adelson.
Okay. Well, Michael, you have a Merry Christmas, you and Claire, and I'll be talking to you probably next year or next week.
Okay. Sounds really good. Thank you for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Francis in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha to you both.
Aloha.
And a speedy recovery to you both.
I certainly hope so. I mean, this thing really did hit Claire a lot harder than it hit me, and it hit me hard.
Well, I guess there's something to be said for how much garlic and how much onion and how much ginger I take in my diet. But aside from that, I had a really bad ironic thought go through my head earlier when I heard all this talk about this asteroid is traveling through the solar system and so forth. It seems apparently it got all beat up by the Oort clouds surrounding the solar system, for that matter, on its way in. Otherwise, that would explain why the obelisk has arrived 16 years late because of it being beat up by the Oort cloud. It was supposed to be arriving to the planet Jupiter, but bypassed it and missed it in the process, and now it's on its way back out again. So, 16 years is a long time.
Well,
16 years is a long time.
I'm sure the science fiction movie aficionados in our audience are going to get your reference here to 2001: A Space Odyssey. But at this point, scientists did determine that, contrary to the high expectations Stephen Hawking had for it, it is just a rock. It's a long, skinny rock. They don't understand it, but it's just a rock.
Well, you know, there goes the adage of being stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Well, definitely, but you know, there's a lot of stuff flying around out there, and we've had a couple of... Sorry?
I said, of course. Besides, I couldn't help with the monolith idea, so I had to throw that in there.
Sometimes a rock is just a rock.
Yes.
That was the other half. You'll have to overlook. But he just decided the same thing you just did, so... Anyway, all right, have a great one. Stay warm and all that kind of good stuff.
All right, thanks an awful lot, Francis. We're going to let you go and keep an eye out the window for large flying mountains heading our way. Okay, the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, getting on back to the situation with Comcast, Washington State is suing Comcast over this service protection plan, which turned out to be promising things that were already free services for Comcast. And more to the point, they were signing customers up for this additional insurance policy without their knowledge and without their permission. And in many cases, they signed up people who specifically said they did not want the service, and yet they were still signed up for it. So we're beginning to see the larger these corporations become, the more greedy and crooked they start to operate. Now, Comcast was out there saying that this plan was of great value and covered virtually all service charges over 99% of the time, and blames the appearance of fraud on flawed methodology and assumptions. So I hope Washington State really nails them, because we're in an era of tremendous abuse by corporations. It's a hallmark of living under a fascist economic dictatorship. Now, the U.S. Department of Treasury has issued sanctions against Israeli billionaire Dan Gertler on allegations of human rights abuses and corruption. Now, Donald Trump came on out earlier today declaring war on human rights abuses and corruption. I hope he will take a look at the Clinton Foundation. But apparently Gertler, senior advisor to the Fluoret Group, held substantial stakes in 2 mines in the Democratic Republic of Congo, a country notorious for child labor and other human rights abuse practices in the mining industry. Now, Fluoret Group sold its Mutanda stake to Glencore earlier this year, but before that, according to the Treasury, the Israeli entrepreneur used his close friendship with the DRC President Joseph Kabila to act as a middleman for mining asset sales in the DRC, requiring some multinational companies to go through Gertler to do business with the Congolese state. This resulted in the DRC losing more than $1.36 billion in revenue, because Gertler arranged for mining assets to be sold at much lower prices than they were worth, as the buyers were offshore entities linked to him. So, anyway, let's take another phone call. Andrea in Oklahoma, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael Rivero. You sound wonderful.
I feel
you
terrible.
You evidently are doing something very right. Sorry?
No, go ahead. You're on the air.
Okay. I was listening to what you were saying about bacteria and that it's so strong it's able to put up with all these different environments. The thing is, back in 93, there was one of our spaceships that was in the air. It was being eaten by bacteria, the steel, the windows, everything, and it finally crashed into the Indian Ocean. And
I think you're talking about Mir. I think you're talking about Mir, and there was actually a show on that the other day. Stay on the line, Andrea. I'm going to come right back to you after these words from our sponsors. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show. We're still talking with Andrea in Oklahoma about things in outer space. And Andrea, what did you want to say next?
Well, if they can survive there in space with your extreme cold and extreme heat, if we venture out to certain planets, like Mars, there's who knows how bad. I don't know that that NASA has reported anything with their equipment, their little rovers that have been going across the Mars or planet.
Well, the problem is all of the spacecraft since Viking are not designed to look for life. They don't have microscopes. Curiosity has got that nice little chemistry lab, and it's producing a lot of the same results we got on Viking, but everyone's hesitating about saying whether it's life or not. Now, the incident with the spaceship you're talking about it's been discovered, and it's ironic. I saw a program on this just the other day, that earthly bacteria, when they get into a weightless environment, they can grow and reproduce much faster. And so it caught everybody by surprise when they were doing routine inspection of Mir, that they found these huge bacterial colonies that were, in fact, eroding components of Mir. Now, that's not the reason Mir came down. They basically got rid of the bacteria. They sterilized the ship. But it did catch them by surprise that these life forms can do very well in a weightless environment. Now, the problem of cross-contamination is a very real one, and it was for that reason that the Viking landers were sterilized, and they were designed to be heat sterilized prior to launch. so that they would not be carrying any earthly bacteria with them that might confuse the onboard instruments. Unfortunately, because NASA declared that what we found on Mars with the labeled release experiment wasn't really alive, they have not been as careful with subsequent probes. And so that means that when something is detected alive on the surface of Mars, you're going to have to go through the additional step of making sure it isn't the descendant of something that hitched a ride from Earth on one of these other spacecraft. So that's going to complicate the situation tremendously. I'll tell you, though, there have been some very tantalizing things that came out of the Curiosity's scanners and some of the earlier rovers. There's what are called the blueberries, which could be hard-shell bacterial colonies. There was this one very odd object, which has been nicknamed the crab, that was imaged sticking out of a hole in the ground. And unfortunately, Curiosity just didn't go back and take a look at it. But it's rather compellingly organic looking. But again, I think there's a great deal of caution about declaring that there's life on Mars. And I think it may have to do with the fact that if it was announced, yes, there's life on Mars today, it's going to transform our society. And we're going to put down our clubs and our bows and our arrows, and we're going to unite together and say, let's go find out who else is out there. And that would be a tremendous loss for the warmongers. So they want to keep it secret for the same reason that the Dominicans tried to keep secret Marco Polo's discovery of China, because it didn't fit in with their society and their power structure. So I think it's about time we got Gilbert.
I was going to say there's this vast ocean that we haven't really been able to get down there and discover what's all going down there. I had another thing I wanted to ask
Europa.
if you're still there. Yeah.
Are you Europa or the one that's underneath the Antarctic Lake Vostok?
Well, any and all of the oceans are still so highly, like, not really known, all that's down there. They're still kind of curious about that area right there by Bermuda and Cuba, if that's Atlantis. But I wanted to ask you about this Canadian billionaire. He and his wife were found killed in their house, both of them hanging, and they're trying to say it was a suicide. I find that...
No, it's being treated as a suspicious death now, because apparently there were ligature marks that didn't line up with the ropes. So that the hanging was staged to cover up a double murder. Okay. I see that as, monopoly. Once you get rid of one, you're still holding more if you are a pharmaceutical here, you've got more territory if this fellow passes away, he and his wife. But I found that very suspicious, and you cleared that up. It does look like murder then. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm so glad. I was going to say I'm so glad that you're feeling better, and Merry Christmas to you and Claire, and I hope it's a better, profitable new year for you guys. That would be very, very nice here, because after a while we get really tired of just living on the edge constantly. So, Andrea, thanks an awful lot. Merry Christmas and have a Happy New Year. And we're coming up here on a commercial break. And when we come on back, we'll be doing more news and more of your phone calls. Stay tuned. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go back to the telephones. Mer in Wisconsin, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, greetings.
Greetings. Merry Christmas.
Fear not, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy, which shall be to all people. Can Claire hear me?
No, I'm afraid Claire had to go back to bed.
Okay. I just wondered if she had a speaker or something.
No.
She just assumed not here.
Well, no, it's her headset cable isn't long enough to run into the bedroom.
Yeah. I kept thinking, bouillon. Does she like bouillon? That'll help put the electrolytes back.
Yes. Yeah, we shopped out the market for all that stuff, and I'm going to be taking good care of her over the weekend, because this thing hit her a lot harder than it hit me.
Well, take good care of yourself too.
I certainly will.
You know what though? I don't know if you heard about the executive order. It's both through the Treasury Department and Trump signed it. It was yesterday.
Yes.
And it's executive order blocking the property of persons involved in serious human rights abuse or corruption.
Yes, I heard about that. I'm waiting to see how it gets implemented. And again, talking about corruption, are they going to aim that at the Clinton Foundation?
Well, I think all of these different, scattered all over the world, are Soros, Schwartz, and Clinton Bush cabal. I think they're all wrapped up into this. You know, I think they've been doing a lot of research. And also his State Department and Justice Department, apparently they're letting, you know, Obama-ites go and just not filling all the seats. They don't need them all. I mean, they were overstaffed, I'm sure, you know, with people like some of these guys in the FBI that are of not much use, except bad use.
Yes. Yeah. Well, again, you know, Trump did campaign on a promise to reduce, you know, the regulatory burden, and that means reducing the staff as well. But yeah, I think Trump's biggest mistake coming into office a year ago was trying to be magnanimous in victory and keeping a lot of the Obama holdovers in place, thinking that they would now be loyal to him. And that's not the way it works in Washington, D.C.
Well, you know, I think like a business, he's trying to sift through the things a little slowly, you know, to see who's salvageable and who isn't. And just how bad it is, I think, is really confronting him. Because, you know, he's really been preparing for this for 30 years. He had said, you know, if it gets bad enough, I'll try to get in there. And they tried to take him out in the helicopter. They've tried to take him out many times. But, you know, we all work together to kind of protect and work together on the whole planet. And actually, I had told this to Dr. Wynn Parker, and he agreed. I told him a couple times to hear it on air, but the planets in the universe interact with each other like cells in the body. It's the body of the universe, and they always have, and they always will. You know, I mean, it's no strange thing. I think they're going to try to use maybe some of the fearmongers, some of the things that many of us have really known about. And you probably do, too, know more than you're letting on.
Well, I'm not sure exactly what you mean about the interaction. We do know that all of the objects in the solar system interact gravitationally with the solar wind. We know that bits and pieces of each body get knocked off by meteors and fall on the other bodies. So it's not totally isolated out there.
Right. Oh, and another thing, and I had told Mikey, because I heard you talk about Stephen Hawking, and I hear so many people talking about him, he's been replaced at least once. Okay? I mean, how hard is it to have... No, he has. ALS, you don't live with ALS for decades. And
well, he's been very fortunate, and he's had very good medical care.
Well,
anyway,
no, they're two different people.
Mer, got to let you go. Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Get on back here. Story is just now breaking. You remember there was this woman, Jill Harth, who came on out and accused Donald Trump of sexually assaulting her during the campaign. And it was big news, and everybody said, oh, this is it. This is the end of Donald Trump here. Apparently, emails have surfaced showing that just before the time that she claimed that Donald Trump sexually assaulted her, she was lobbying to become his makeup artist for the campaign trail as part of her effort to promote her new male cosmetic line, Made Man. And so apparently she was trying to get into business with Donald Trump, try to be his makeup artist, and apparently he turned her down. And she just decided she was going to file this sexual assault lawsuit, which was then withdrawn with the settlement of the lawsuit of Trump allegedly pulling out of a business deal, which may have been with this lady and this cosmetic line. But the upshot of it is that the claim of sexual assault was this idea, this woman's idea of revenge for a failed business arrangement. We were talking about that the other day, that a lot of these allegations and accusations are, in fact, acts of revenge or political gain. All right, now let's get on back here. North Korea is still warning that a U.S. naval blockade would be considered an act of war. And apparently the U.S. is thinking that U.S. sanctions against North Korea are not going to have any real teeth because the U.S. doesn't have any trade or diplomatic ties to start with, and North Korea, because of its decades of isolation, is pretty much internally self-sufficient. So it looks like the U.S., in order to provoke this situation, to escalate it, to ramp it up, is now talking about a naval blockade of the whole of North Korea in order to blockade other countries from carrying out trade with North Korea. Where that's not going to work, of course, is on the shared borders with Russia and China, who may not go along with the blockade. But that apparently is the thinking in Washington, D.C., and it is an act of war. When you blockade somebody, it's an act of war. And again, North Korea has not attacked us. North Korea is building weapons of deterrence, and in the current history of U.S. aggressions, that's a very wise and prudent thing for them to be doing. But they haven't attacked us here. Now, over at the Justice Department, oh man, you're going to love this one. The Justice Department is claiming that increasing traffic stops by 56% will lower crime. Okay? And basically, this is just more organized government theft. Because what they mean by traffic stops, cop pulls you over, writes you a ticket. Ticket costs you a lot of money. And apparently over in Milwaukee, law enforcement claimed that increasing traffic stops by 56% resulted in a reduction in violent crime. They're not explaining how that happened, just that it got the public's attention. And, of course, the police are using these traffic citations to help balance their budgets. It's pillaging. They do the same thing here in Hawaii. I remember about 4 years ago, all of a sudden, all of the fines went way up, some as high as 10 times what they had been before. I mean, if you're using your cell phone while driving and you don't have an earpiece, if you're actually holding up the cell phone, that's a $300 ticket. And I think the more you put police onto traffic stops, the less police are going to be there fighting crime, and you're going to see crime go up. But I think this is just Milwaukee police grabbing more cash from the citizens and trying to make it look like this is a good idea. I don't think they're going to sell that. I don't think they can sell that. Alrighty, this is a little bizarre. Getting on back to the world of computers and Bitcoin all in once. Apparently adult webcam site CamSoda is launching a new interactive platform that can link your interactive sex toys with the performance of leading cryptocurrencies, including Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Litecoin, which means when they're going up, you'll get a little tingle of excitement. This, I think, is a perfect illustration of what I say when I think our computer technology is getting a little decadent. I don't think we need to computerize everything. I don't think we need to computerize that sort of thing here. Getting on back to Donald Trump's wall. Somebody's done a study and discovered that building the wall will reduce the federal prison costs by $1.34 billion annually, because over 20% of the individuals imprisoned in federal prison were not born in the United States. This immigration issue, it has to be brought under control. People are dying. People are being made very ill. We've had diseases reintroduced to the United States that were previously eradicated, all because they're being brought in by the refugees and the immigrants. All right, let's take some phone calls. Al in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Al, are you
Hi,
there?
Mike.
Yeah, there you are.
I'm here.
You're on the air.
Okay. I just wanted to say something about when you were referring to the police and their forfeiture scheme. Well, one of the first things they're going to do, because they increase that number, thinking the crime will go down, they're going to increase their numbers, right?
Yes.
And that's where they got you, because they're going to get so big that they can't be taken down.
You mean the police?
Like, what is it? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. Well, they're public service. They're supposed to be a public service, but there's no law on the books that states that they have to protect you or even respond to a call.
You're absolutely right there.
Crazy?
There was a very famous case out of Washington, D.C., Georgetown, in fact. 3 young ladies were sharing a condo or apartment there, and some guys broke on in and started raping and assaulting one of them. The other 2 called for police help from an upper floor, and then later on, when they assumed the police had shown up, went on down, they got captured by the intruders, and they were raped and abused all night long. And the women sued the police department, and they lost because the court said there is no actual law that says the police are there to protect you from crime. And that's the actual law here. You're on your own, and yet they insist we give up our guns and other means of self-defense.
Exactly. It's the Wild West. I mean, my good God. I understand it's it's the United States of America.
Yes.
To a certain extent, you're still the freest country on the face of this planet, but
we're losing it. We're losing it.
Things have changed, and
Yes,
it's getting bad. My friends just came back from China, and they were telling me about how it was there. And wow, Mike.
Yeah.
What I could tell you wouldn't surprise you. It would not surprise you. It's not like what we hear at all.
Well, I learned that myself years ago when I was working all over Europe, and I got to see that what was really going on in those countries was not what our media was reporting. Those were very nice places, and especially looking around today at our deteriorated nation, it's very obvious we're an empire in decline.
Mike?
Yes.
Canada's in the same boat.
Yes.
It is, period. Actually, we're more in debt than the United States is, and we're a smaller country. That's why we have this massive immigration. The United States seems to want to avoid that, right? Obviously, they're admitting defeat. You know what? We don't have the infrastructure to actually do this. Not to mention, like, who's going to vet these people, right?
Yes.
I hate using that word, but who's going to find out who these people are that we're allowing into the country, giving this full support of citizenship, only to find out that, hey, you know what, they're going to let us down. There's always that possibility. It always happens.
Well, again, I think Soros and his globalists are basically doing the full court press. They realize that the population of Europe, population of the United States are starting to dig in their heels over this multiculturalist melting pot idea, and so they're just trying to ram it through as hard as they can.
It didn't really work well in Canada, up here. I mean, we have the French and the English. Those are the official languages of Canada, and we can't get along. You're going to add another language, and then another, and then another. I mean, I'm not trying to sound confined or anything, but if I want a full-on vacation, I want to just get the hell out of where I am, I'm going to step into another culture. And that's what it's all about, travel. And that's the way it should stay.
Yes.
There's a reason France is France and Russia's Russia. Go there, enjoy it, and then, if you want to come back home, come back home. If you don't, well, stay there. Who cares?
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. But again, I think it's part of the globalist agenda to erase the signs of individual culture, like they're attacking Christmas and Hanukkah at that university. because the idea is to take all of the human beings on planet Earth and just blur them all together into this one mass of worker bees with no sense of identity, no sense of self, no sense of history, because people without a strong sense of identity are much easier to control.
Conquer? Well, divide and conquer. That says it all right there. And who likes to fund that sort of idea? Like, who's actually out there perpetuating the divide and conquer mentality?
Well, we're seeing it from within our own government.
BLM and all that, Antifa and all that crap.
Yes.
Yeah, well, mostly, right? Heaven forbid if we look at them, you know, with eyes of dispersion. Oof. What have you been doing while I've been asleep? Nah, that won't. They don't allow that. Thanks for your time, Mike. I hope you're, you know, I'm glad you're feeling better. I missed you.
Well, I miss me too, and I am feeling better, but obviously we hope to be all the way better by next Tuesday. Okay?
Well, I hope you and Lady Claire have a great Christmas. I'm doing probably the same thing you're doing for Christmas. I'm going to go to the food bank and, you know, just give them a bunch of stuff here. I hope I was, you know, smart enough to understand that, you know, some people do like to eat meat, you know, on occasions.
Yeah.
Thanks,
all right,
Mike.
Al, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with the last segment of our program after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our program. Last segment on this just before Christmas broadcast here. We're going to try and grab a couple more phone calls before the end of the program. Al in Canada, I'm sorry, Mateus in Canada. Aloha, Mateus. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Mateus?
Hey, Michael. Get well soon, you and Claire.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to wish you and everyone else a very non-politically correct Merry Christmas, Christ, Mass, baby Jesus' birthday, Christmas, and I hope it's a white Christmas. Okay, I'm getting carried away here. Anyway, snowy white Christmas would be great, which is going to be no problem up here in Canada. And that is, oh yeah, and no other religion is being told to censor. So
okay, we're losing the connection.
Prejudice and discrimination against Christians to tell them that they have to say happy holidays when you're not telling anybody else that. So I'm going to promote religious freedom of expression and equality in religion and say Merry Christmas to everybody. So Merry Christmas. Thank you for your great service that you're doing. And just thank God, or thank everybody, thank ourselves, thank God that we're not evil, like all these bastards that we're trying to keep under the spotlight and to not let them get away. So just, even we might be broke and sick sometimes, we're at least not evil bastards. So there's a certain comfort in that.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that. We're having a little bit of a problem with your phone line. We're going to take one more phone call before the end of the program. Kathleen in Paris, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, I'm Kathleen.
Yes.
In Paris.
Yes.
Okay. Mateus in Canada, he's so cute. Well, I wanted to talk about, you said earlier in the last segment that the police are not, there's no law saying they have to respond.
That's the law here in the United States.
Right. And so we assume that there is, that they have to respond. Well, if I'm not wrong, there's also no law that says we have to pay taxes, income tax. We just assume that we have to pay it.
Well, again,
am I wrong?
You raise an interesting point of view, because if we're not actually getting the services that we're being charged for, why should we pay for it? And more we're seeing that the police departments are all about maintaining control of the people. Here in Hawaii, there's a weird phenomenon. They're moving all the police stations right into the shopping malls, which tells you the job of the police is to protect the merchandise, to protect the profitability. Anyway, listen, Kathleen, I'm going to let you go because we're almost to the end of the show, and I want to put out a message. So thank you very much.
Okay.
We'll let you go here. Bye-bye. Every year at this time, we'll see the phrases or hear the phrases, peace on earth, goodwill toward men. And it's ubiquitous. It's everywhere. It's on the cards. But I think people don't really stop and think about what it's supposed to mean, because we certainly do not have peace on earth. In fact, Earth this year, this Christmas, is the least peaceful I've ever seen it in my entire lifetime, as we seem to head into a new world war. So try and hold that thought of peace on earth, goodwill toward all around you. Have a Merry Christmas. We'll be back on Tuesday. Aloha, America.